Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice little four-game NBA slate. I also have some picks for you for football today and basketball, so I'll get to those at the end of the video. With that said, let's get into the slate. We've been doing up and down so far this season with NBA. It's been a really crazy season with all the injuries and guys sitting out and stuff, and today is going to be more of that. So let's get into the injury report. For the Wizards, Koulibaly is questionable. For the Lakers, LeBron is questionable and Reddish is questionable. Hakamura and Vincent are out. For the Cavs, Mitchell is questionable and Okoro is questionable. For the Pelicans, Zion is doubtful and McCollum is out. For the Jazz, Markkanen is questionable and Kessler is questionable. For the Mavs, Lively is out, and for the Clippers, Plumlee is out. So this slate is going to be somewhat interesting from that perspective. We're going to start with Trae Young here. Trae's played very well. His price is still pretty good. I wish it was a little bit lower, but as long as it's under 10,000 bucks, he's been very solid this season. He's really only had, I think, one game under 40 fantasy points all year, and that gives him a lot of potential here. Um, he's been consistent, and this is a nice small slate where he'll have a lot of upside in a fast-paced matchup, where several of these games are not ideal for fantasy so much, especially these two middle games. Really, all three of the left games. Atlanta definitely in a really good spot here. We are going to look at Paul George for the Clippers. Now he's been the most consistent since since Harden has joined the team, and he's been over 40 fantasy points in 5 straight games, and he looks like he's going to be a consistent man for the Clippers. Since Harden joined the team, he's 6 and 7 at over 41 fantasy points. Uh, 6 of 7 over being over 41 fantasy points. And with Westbrook on the bench, coming off the bench now, he's actually been really solid in those last 5 games as well. So I think he does have a lot of potential here. Uh, Obviously, the ceiling is not very high. It's pretty much where his price is, but he's definitely capable of a good game here, and he's got a high floor. Looking at Mr. Ingram for the Pelicans, it looks like Zion might miss, and if that's the case, he's going to get plenty of usage today. His price has come up a little bit from where it was this early in the season, but he's been very solid, being over 40 fantasy points in most games, and he should have a usage boost as a result of the situation. Obviously, the matchup isn't perfect, but it's still okay, and he's a decent option on the slate. Kyle Kuzma also interesting today in the faster paced game of the slate. He has a lower floor than some of the other guys in his price range, but his ceiling is just as high as anybody's, and he's played pretty well recently, especially in the plus matchup games, where his usage is really high. And it looks like the Wizards, while they're losing, they're actually starting to score a lot of points, and that definitely gives some potential here, especially on the smaller slate. Then we're going to look at James Harden for the Clippers. Now, his price has gone up as his floor remains pretty low in the mid 30s, but he's started really rough to start with the Clippers. In the last 4 games since Westbrook went to the bench, he's been over 38 fantasy points in each, and that gives him a pretty safe floor here for this matchup against the Mavericks. I do expect him to play 35 minutes in this one, as I think it'll be pretty close. It won't be such like the two games against the Spurs that were a little bit easier. But I do expect this to be a tough game, and I think that it's going to be high scoring from his perspective at least. Then we're going to look at Jordan Poole, um, who is finally starting to play like we expected him to so far this season. He's had some very low floor games, but he has played very well recently, and that shows some positive signs. Even against tough opponents, he's playing pretty well. And so it is nice to see him finally shooting the ball very well. And though he's not getting a ton of peripheral stats, which is harming his fantasy output, his price is cheap enough that he's viable in a plus matchup here. Then we'll look at Capella, who has been extremely consistent so far this season. Uh, he doesn't. His price has finally hit over 6,000, which it hadn't been all season, but he has been pretty consistent. However, his minutes are not as high as a lot of other players in his price range, and part of that is because he's in a timeshare. But he's definitely capable of a solid game here, and he actually has pretty good upside for the matchup. Should be a high-scoring affair. Then we're going to look at Rashawn Holmes for the Dallas Mavericks. Now he should draw the start today. He didn't. He played more in the last game against the Lakers for the first time this season. He's actually been really solid in points per minute, but as you can see, he hasn't played very many minutes. That said, I went back and looked at last season, and he was pretty decent in games where he scored over 20 uh, minutes. He managed to get double digit or get over 19 fantasy points in 4 of the 5 games that I found in that kind of situation. So I think he's definitely capable of a decent game here. If he draws the start, he'll be in play. But just make sure he does draw the start today. And he'll probably be relatively popular as a cheap option on a slate that doesn't have a lot of cheapness. At least not yet. If Mitchell was to be ruled out, that would open up some Cavaliers. If LeBron misses, that would open up some Lakers. Yeah, so with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.